Krishna. So, good morning, friends. You know, globalization is very, very old. Maybe as old as Buddha and Genghis Khan. And banking is also fairly old, maybe 500 years old. But internet is only 40 years old. And Facebook is only 8 years old. So we're going to talk about globalization in the very recent context. And already some people are talking about some amount of globalization fatigue. You know, what with Icelandic banks having to deal with UK depositors, leading to almost some kind of an international tiff. And then you of course have the Swiss banks dealing with US regulators and so on. So I'll take about 8 or 10 minutes to lay out the theme. Of course, it's a very big topic, and I'm not claiming that we will cover everything in this theme, a few slides only. But just to give you some kind of contours of what are the topics or points of debate. So first of all, just a quick look, as I said, in the recent past, in the last perhaps 30 years, the globalization of banks has already undergone some kind of a change. If you look at top banks in the league tables in terms of their asset size or in terms of their market value, there's a distinct change. You had mostly Japanese banks which used to dominate the top 10 rankings, 8 out of 10 in the 1980s, late 1980s. Then you had mostly American banks and perhaps a few European banks dominating the top 10 ranking. And then very soon, currently you have mostly Chinese banks, 4 or 5 of the top 10 Chinese banks. So going ahead the next 10, 20 years, are we going to find perhaps some Indian banks in the league, something to look forward to. Secondly, we are already seeing some kind of a change in the globalization strategy. About a couple of decades ago, globalization meant that you went and planted a flag in as many countries as possible. 70 countries, 100 countries. People used to take pride. Mr. Paul referred to a famous kind of European takeover, and that bank used to pride itself in having flags in so many countries. But now we find that instead of being the globalization strategy is now a debate between wanting to be in as many geographies or go deeper into very select geographies. That is, have a leadership position in perhaps 4 or 5 countries as against being present in many countries. So this is going to be something that is going to engage bank globalization strategy I think in the coming years. Next question is about regulation. All said and done, globalization means that you can be present in multiple geographies. But the fact is today that regulation continues to be sovereign and increasingly sovereign, meaning we were just talking about it earlier today that there are now regulations which are arising from individual countries. Notwithstanding the fact that there's some convergence of regulation because of thanks to emergence of forums like G7, G8 and now G20, so there's a conscious harmonization of regulation. But nevertheless, there are countries which are going ahead unilaterally with certain regulations. Most notably, you've heard of regulations coming out of the US or the UK. So it's going to be, that is going to affect, that is definitely going to affect globalization strategy of banks. I mean, how much burdensome or not so burdensome is it going to be to comply with regulations which are essentially sovereign, because the sovereign regulators are going to serve primarily first national interests before globalized interests. And some examples of course are here. But of course, even despite G20, we also see slight nuances in differences in approaches to regulation. In fact, we are seeing differences between Europe and America also. So this is going to be one more factor. Another big factor is on capital account convertibility. That already after the East Asian crisis of 1997 and most recently after the financial crisis of 2008, there's some caution about opening up your capital account completely. So, because once you open the capital account completely, and this is the example I gave of Icelandic banks and UK depositors is an example of the impact of full capital account convertibility. Not to mention that there were issues about regulation and prudential banking and so on, but CAC does have an implication for bank balance sheet, the country's balance sheet. And of course, countries want to go slowly on CAC, capital account convertibility, on the basis of certain macroeconomic indicators like trade deficit, fiscal deficit, inflation, and so on. And the fiscal situation of most countries is becoming very, matter of big concern. So I don't think CAC is going to happen soon in many of the emerging nations. And the fact is that the two fastest growing economies in the world, which is India and China, have had a closed capital account ever. So it's not clear that open capital account is essential for faster economic growth or faster growth of banking.